Cool. All right, guys. A little after 7 now. If somebody is 20 that signed up, but you never know. There's another one. Steve just dropped in. Anyway, listen. We want to do a few of these as the year goes on, just to be accessible. I know it's tough for people to get firsthand information. We try to put out as much information as we possibly can, whether it's social media, email, website, YouTube videos. I even experimented with just a recording. Mike called it Jim's Thoughts. So anyway, the idea is just to try to get more information firsthand, so you folks know what's going on, and gives you a chance to ask questions about what's going on and maybe what's not going on. So, Steve, where are you? All I can see is a chest. That's a little disturbing. All right.
Steve's on mute.
Yeah, that's okay. Um, so anyway, I'll give you a little rundown maybe of we are trying like hell to get into federal court. Every time we spend the money to file a case, the first one was training, the second one was the long gun issue. The state suspends that part of the law, which means we still spent the money, but we actually don't get our day in court because the judge is going to say, well, they suspended it, so what do you want me to do? The long gun issue is a little different because they said they were going to basically put out a guidance letter that they were not going to use the testing systems like the handguns for long guns, and we're not going to make a long gun roster. That was 4 months ago, and there's been no guidance. The last official guidance we've actually got from EOPS was back in November, and I am convinced we're not going to see any more, because every time they've had to put out a guidance, they've literally weakened their own law because they had to admit it didn't work. So I don't think we'll see any more. We've even had people like, for instance, the Wild Turkey Federation back in November sent a letter to the Attorney General and wanted some clarification on the non-resident hunter issue, because that's incredibly confusing and dangerous for people coming in here to hunt now. And they refused to respond. So that tells us they're not going to give us any more information. They're not going to give us any more guidance because they don't want to weaken their law. And they also don't want to give us evidence to go to court, but we're still going. We had an interesting case. It wasn't our case, but it was Jason Guida's case out of Boston today. Municipal judge actually ruled that despite the 40-day timeline for processing a license, there was no guarantee to that. And since there were no punishments to the licensing people for not complying with the 40-day, that there was no right to a timely license. And the fact that Boston was trying their best to keep up, but there was a bulge of license applications after this new law passed. Oddly enough, I think that actually helps us, because it will show a high court that the laws are not protecting the rights of people. So we're already talking to the attorneys about that, because we are going to challenge the licensing system as a whole. We're not going to try to get people their individual licenses anymore. It's a matter of trying to attack the system as a whole. The other issue with the assault style firearms, we were waiting to see what would happen with Snopes and Ocean State Tactical before we spent the money to bring it up, because we already did this in 2016. Thank God the NRA, most of their finances did it, but I think all told we spent close to $500,000 bringing it all the way up to the United States Supreme Court, only to have them decline to even hear the case. So we weren't about to make that same mistake. However, because Snopes and Ocean State were not heard, and the reason they were not heard was because the attorneys in those cases tried to jump the entire system all the way to the Supreme Court. And somebody smarter than me can probably pronounce it, but it's an interlocutory appeal. And the Supreme Court doesn't like that unless somebody's really in danger, of going to prison right away or something. They won't tend to interfere with the process until it gets to them because they want the lower courts to work through the process and gives them actually something to work with. It seems the president can do that on a moment's notice, but but not us. So we are going to move forward with the case. There's a bunch of the national groups that are jumping in with us. NRA is helping out a lot. Second Amendment Foundation, to some extent, Firearms Policy Coalition, even GOA is around in a couple of the cases. So we're getting the support we need, and we'll see what happens from there. Suitability is just, we had 3 suitability cases that we had positive outcomes on at the district level, and as soon as it got to the higher state courts, they destroyed it. And not only they destroy it, they just simply gave the person their license, but then wouldn't refund them or make the town pay for all the expenses this person had to spend just to get a license that they were due. So, that's probably $5,000 out of somebody's pocket to get a license to go through the system. So we've been trying to help out as much as we can. I think eventually that's another one we're just going to have to bring to the federal court. Now, the problem with everything we're going to bring to federal court is we have to go through the first district. We know we're going to lose in the first district. They are just terrible on the Second Amendment. So our only hope is to get through the system and get up to the Supreme Court. Who knows how long that's going to take, but we'll see what happens. So I think the best thing we do, we've done in other meetings, is actually just go around the room, because I'm here for your questions more than I'm here to yak at you. But you tell my wife, give me a microphone, I can fill an hour without blinking. So if anybody's got questions that I can respond to, and just be forewarned, the answer might be shit if I know, but I'll give it a try. So I think we still have the hands up command on Zoom. So if anybody's got a question, you can just pop up it's under React. If you go down the bottom, it's under React. It's a heart shape, and then you click on that, and there should be a raise your hand thingamajig.
There it is.
Well, there's a bunch of thumbs up over there. Yeah. Is it Rika? Is that?
It's actually Rich.
Oh, Rich.
It's
okay.
Richard, but I cut it short because everything else has my name fully installed on everything.
Okay.
Anyway, my question is related to a close friend who for many years has lived and has his license to carry in Massachusetts, moved to New Hampshire, turned in surrendered his Mass license to carry, has his New Hampshire license, but now is reapplied as a non-resident.
Right.
It has been 4 or 5 months since that has happened. And he's wondering how much longer. And I'm wondering if you have an idea of what that's been running for people, Jim.
Standard now is a year. Matter of fact, Second Amendment Foundation, along with Goal, and I'm not sure if COM2A is jumping in or not, but we actually have a case almost ready to go to federal court just on the non-resident issue, because there's a lot of constitutional issues there, not just a delay, but the way they treat out-of-state people so differently than they treat in-state people, which is purely unconstitutional. You can't do that from state to state. So anyway, that's where we are. It's unconscionable, but the problem that they have is they don't want to fund the system. I mean, I know the woman personally who runs the system, and she's a good egg. But if you include non-resident licenses, there's somewhere around 700,000 licenses, and there's only 4 people at the Firearms Record Bureau. And the interesting thing is, the excuse we got was they only had 2 machines that actually printed the license itself, and one of them's broken, can't be repaired, and they don't have a contract to get any new ones, and there's no funding to get anything new. So if that isn't a Massachusetts-based problem, I'm not sure what is. It's ridiculous. But yeah, it's very frustrating because one of the concerns we have, especially, is competitors, but also as hot as it is outside right now, hunting season's coming, and people are buying non-resident licenses thinking they're just going to come in and hunt. And we are advising everybody, do not come in this state without a non-resident temporary license. I don't care what you're carrying. I even have questions about black powder because they removed the exemption for it in the state law. Now, I've had some people try to explain to me that, well, yeah, but it's exempt under federal law. There's nothing in federal law that exempts anything from a Massachusetts gun license. It doesn't exist. That's not what happens. Now, the other issue is the police, including the environmental police, the game wardens, have had no training on this. And the state does not expect to give them any training until sometime in 26. So the concern is, I don't think a state police officer or an EPO would go rogue. But if you had maybe a small town officer that's just reading the law and doesn't understand what's going on, people could get in some serious trouble, So we're really concerned about those folks, and we'll just have to move on with the lawsuit. So I think I mentioned earlier too that back in November, the National Wild Turkey Federation for us sent a letter to the Attorney General's office in Mass asking very specific questions about non-resident hunters. And the Attorney General has declined to answer those questions. So that tells you a lot.
It does. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Mike, I think you're up next. Mike Pontus.
Hi, Jim. First, I just want to say thank you. I do have some questions, but I want to say thank you to Joel for showing up at the Massachusetts Freedom Congress earlier this year. I'm not sure if you know about it, but that was a great event.
Yeah.
And I want to ask, it's come apparent to me that, and like, obviously the lawsuits, that's the main focus and all that, but it's become apparent to me that a lot of the problem, at least in my experience, is the general consensus or the court of popular opinion, court of public opinion in Massachusetts. Is there anything Goal can do or anything that any words of wisdom to help change that? And I understand that's a losing battle, but the reason that I ask is because I was just talking to a friend the other day, and I was telling him how awful this bill is, and he goes, "Oh, it's just training requirements." He's like, "I think that's a good." He goes, "I think that's a good bill. I have my LTC, and it was way too easy, man." And which we're all on the same page, I think, on this call how we feel about that. So
yeah.
I don't know if there's any words of wisdom you have for that, or anything that Goal's doing to kind of educate the public, even those that aren't already in the issue.
Yeah, we're kind of waiting until the fall because what we want to do is work with Toby's group, the coalition. So as we're starting to educate people, we are on the same page, the same message. So messaging is awfully important. The only problem with the coalition, great people, but they're volunteers. So, trying to get extra time out of volunteers is not easy. You folks all know that. So, it's hard enough. But yeah, that's what we're trying to do. And basically, it's in order to get some attention. And I've been saying this for a little while now. We're going to have to take a little page from the left. I'm not talking about destruction of property or what the hell's going on in LA, but we need to physically get out there. Now, our problem is we can't hire paid protesters, which we all know that's what's happening across the country. But we can still make their lives a little uncomfortable. It doesn't take 1,000 people to show up. It could be a half a dozen people that have signs that we produce that show up. I don't care if Maura Healey's opening a grocery store, but the more we're in front of her, the better we are. The other problem we face is the media, obviously. We know, especially when I was on the NRA board, that the media is actually being given strict orders not to pay attention to us, not to give us any coverage. So if anybody like the Globe calls, I know they've already got the story written before they publish it because they're not going to allow it. So it's going to have to be one of those things where we're going to have to figure out a way to get the Second Amendment community to be physically places that we've never done. The 2A community has never had to really protest. Yeah, we've had some phenomenal rallies, but they weren't sustained. It was just one and done. And then people will say, well, I already tried that. It didn't work. It's not the way this stuff works, because if you look at all the civil rights fights in history, it wasn't we had one rally and then went home because it didn't work. So we have to be sustainable, but also make the message clear, because frankly, and I've been saying this since it was passed, this is the worst attack on civil rights in modern U.S. history. And the fact that the state won't even tell us how to comply, even if we want to, that in itself is disgusting. But yeah. Anything else, Mike?
Just that.
There you go. More Healy.
The other thing was, what was I going to say? I was watching a hearing the other day from the State House on this emerging firearms technology. Are you guys attending those meetings? Because it's kind of scary hearing what they say in those things.
Yeah, those hearings were a complete joke. I went to one. Jake McGuigan actually sits on that panel. Jake is the gentleman from the National Shooting Sports Foundation. And to tell you what a joke this thing was, I showed up at the first hearing, and the colonel of the state police is on the panel. And another state trooper who I know, his name is Chris, he sits on the F cab with me, was in the room. And of course, the colonel went up and introduced himself because he's a new colonel, and said, what are you doing here, troop? And he goes, oh, I'm on the panel too. Really? So you had the colonel of the state police, another state police officer. The colonel had no idea there was another state police officer even on the panel. And another guy on the panel was actually the guy who owns the patent to microstamp it.
Yes.
And I mean, if that's not a conflict of interest, So I knew it was a joke when I sat down, because they asked me to come in and talk to them. So it wasn't a matter of testifying pro or con on a bill. It was giving them information. Well, the chairwoman, as soon as I sat down, I felt like I was in a Senate, confirmation hearing for a Supreme Court justice, because her first comment was, did you and Mr. Harris on this day say this about this and this? And I'm like, whoa, pull in the reins a little bit there. I thought we were here to have a conversation. So it was a joke. Even at the very last meeting they had, Jake McGuigan called them all out and said this was just a joke. Just like the Michael Day listening tour, where he gave a campaign speech at every damn stop, and it was a joke. So yeah, it's pretty sad. But yeah, we were involved as much as we could be. The problem with the State House now, and this is a more general issue, not just our 2A issue, it's every issue. And when I speak at universities, I actually tell the students this. The most dangerous thing about COVID wasn't the disease or the mask or any of the bull. It was every level of government, from the dog catcher to the president's office, reaching to find their limitations and never finding any. And they realized we don't matter. As soon as they're elected, they're done with us. They don't care. They could care less what we think. I mean, we literally shut down the speaker for 2 months on that bill, and they realized, who cares? We're going to do what we want to do. If you go up there on any weekday right now, 90% of those office doors are locked. There's nobody there. So I actually tell the students in college about advocacy. I said, you're going to have to learn something different than what we used to do, which was to talk to people nonstop, because now you are dealing with elected officials who do not want you to talk to them, don't want to be communicated with. And unless it's a pet project, unless it's something they really want to push, they don't care. And I've talked to some pretty high paid lobbyists that used to work the building, we call it the building, and they're all saying the same thing. Doesn't matter. They're going to do what they want. So it's a sad state of affairs in the State House, but that's what's happening. So,
All right. Thank you.
yep. Rick, I think you're next.
Oh, did it wrong.
You talking to me there, Jim?
We
Jim?
had Rick and lost him.
Different Rick?
Oh, Rick, is it Notkin? Rick Notkin, I'm sorry.
I think he's on mute.
He is.
on mute.
He's trying to figure it out.
All right, I got it,
There we
right?
go.
Yay, there he goes. That's all right. Don't worry.
Couple comments on the non-resident thing and a training thing.
Yeah.
So yes, I'm glad you're sort of pursuing. I realize that the current residents of Massachusetts, not the escapees like me that went north, are the prime focus. The whole non-resident thing, do they could save a lot of money if they did it for the 6 years like they do for resident permits. But when I went down to Chelsea for my very first interview, the person that interviewed me basically said, one person makes all these decisions to grant them or not.
Yeah.
So I think I accidentally said, so if this person's having a bad day, I got my permit anyway. But I realized after I said that, I shouldn't have said that. But it's kind of really lame.
Yeah.
So again, I know they switched it to 6 years to avoid using the permit as your NICS check after that went through, if I'm recalling correctly. So they could just make the non-resident one 6 years as well, and they could save a bunch of cash.
Yeah, well, they don't want to.
I am well aware.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I have to say I renewed and it didn't show up.
Yeah.
And I still have family in Mass, so I'm a little nervous. And I called and they said, well, we sent it out. We'll send you a replacement. I got it in 3 days, which stunned me. Someone actually helped me there, like at the DMV. And then my other question is, there was a thing within the last, say, 3 weeks, maybe 4, from Standard Friday Gold Mail about getting guidance on doing the training, because my son has friends, they want to get their LTC, so they'll tap me for running the official class. Is that worth getting, that little PowerPoint thing? I still have a note to send an email, or should I just wait?
Well, the PowerPoint is really for instructors.
Yeah,
to
I'm an
use in their
instructor.
class. So yeah, sure. Yeah, why not? The problem is we don't. I mean, that the PowerPoint is basically what we can put together about the law. All the other stuff, the parameters haven't even been put in place. The standards haven't been put in place, which was a whole nother thing, because the EOPS just filed their report on the accessibility and affordability of live fire training the other day, and there's no standards. So most of us were, okay, how are we supposed to testify on a mythical monster? We have no idea what you want us to say. And of course, they never visited a club, never visited a range. But the absurdity of the report, which they were supposed to look at the affordability and accessibility of live fire training, and the report basically said to the legislature, yeah, you guys should look at affordability and accessibility and figure it out.
Of course, it'd be nicer if they just realized that the required training is unconstitutional, but let's not go there.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Sure. Len, what's going on? Constable.
Yes, sir. Constable retired.
Constable retired. There you go.
Yeah. When COVID hit, that was the end of being a constable, because serving legal papers with a court date of never doesn't really work. Okay. It's
well,
lovely.
that's still happening anyway, even after COVID. So
yeah, I know.
Yeah, they just announced they're going to start releasing prisoners because they can't get a lawyer. So, yeah, literally, it was a State House News Service article.
No,
Yeah,
I know. I've been
they
watching,
released yesterday.
I've been watching Channel 25 because I miss most of the time the New Hampshire station for news. I've semi-retired on training because of the fact that we don't know what the hell we're supposed to be teaching. And I can't afford to run a class twice for one fee because I have to pay the club when I use it. And I don't think it's fair to the students to tell them that, oh, when you go for renewal, you're going to have to take another class. So from a moral and ethical point of view, I'm not teaching the BFS courses until they figure out what the hell we're supposed to teach. Now, what I am doing still has been qualifying people under LEOSA that live in Massachusetts. And something came up which caused me to go and do a little research. And it turns out there's an exemption for law enforcement, including retirees, in the new section 131M small e. However, the exemption only exists as long as your qualification is still valid. So if you miss requalifying, every year by one day, and you possess large capacity magazines, which according to this law is legal even for retirees, but if you miss your date by one day, you're a felon for that day, facing what, 10-year prison sentence and prohibited person across the country.
Yep.
I've sort of verified this with a retired lieutenant from Mass State Police that I go to down in Mass to get my annual qualification, because getting a retiree qualification in New Hampshire is almost impossible. It's very, very rare that you can get it done unless you retire from the department where you live. So, any take on this? He says basically it's an exemption from illegal possession of large capacity magazines and firearms for law enforcement as long as they're still qualified under LEOSA.
Yeah, well, I mean, the entire bill is full of landmines,
Yep.
and it's done on purpose. So if they want you, they got you, and that's the whole thing. Now, like I said about the court cases, the problem is they're not really enforcing things publicly. Now, there are cases. I had an attorney contact me, and I thought it was the perfect case. A Vietnam vet driving through the state, didn't have the gun with him, but he had a 30-round magazine in the back seat, and was being charged. Yeah, until I got the court documents, and they found 30 bags of heroin under his seat. His female passenger had crack cocaine in her bra, and I'm like, okay, never mind. And I still had people, well, yeah, but you got to test it. Yeah. But more than likely, with the drugs, they're going to drop the gun charges anyway, because they always go after the drug charges. So, but there's all kinds of things. It's like instead of AW ban, now it's ASF. My contention is the 1994 date, as far as the actual gun goes, is gone.
Right.
It only exists now for the magazines. But what they're trying to tell us, and Chief Glidden is pushing this, is, well, yeah, but it says you had to lawfully own it before August 1st. And in order to do that, you had to blah, blah, blah. And I said, no, there is no time where a defendant's going to go before a judge and the judge is going to say, well, you should have known what the law was before, what it is now. That's no. But the other thing that's in our favor is that they specifically left the date in for the magazines. So why do them differently? And what we're going to try to prove is intent, that they intended to make the new grandfathering date August 1st, because that's what Bruce Tarr tried to do. And the 2016 date, as far as I'm concerned, is useless because it refers to, the old guidance letter or enforcement letter from the AG in 16 refers to a law that no longer exists. So the guidance letter, as far as I'm concerned, is moot.
Yeah, the guidance letter was never law to begin with.
Nope.
It was a friggin' press conference.
Yeah, it was interpretation. So,
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Jim?
Keep up the good work.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm gonna pile
Oh, I'm
on.
sorry, Jim Viakos?
Vakos.
Vakos. There you
Thanks.
go. What
No,
nationality is that, Jim?
Greek.
Ah,
It was
Tikanis.
Vlahopoulos a long time ago.
Yeah.
So anyway, no, I'm planning to move to the slightly more free state of New Hampshire in a couple of years. And so when I heard a couple of people asking about non-resident permits, and I'm wondering, I heard what you said that they're taking like a year to issue them. But when they do issue, do you have any idea, like, what's their policy? Do they tend to issue? Do they tend not to? Do you have to have a reason, et cetera, et cetera? I know you're supposed to have a reason, but what reasons do they accept?
Actually, no, there's no more reasons
Oh, good.
that would be in violation of Bruin.
Good.
They can't have a reason. Now, they still have suitability in Massachusetts. So, that'd be very difficult for a non-resident, but yeah, no, you don't have to have a reason like we used to have. So, but the biggest problem shouldn't say the biggest, one of the additional problems with a non-resident is you don't have the grandfathering, that if you apply for a renewal prior to the expiration, you're not covered. So you have to start the process all over again if they don't issue your
Right.
license in time.
Right.
So,
Wow.
and we're not sure because they haven't pushed it yet, only because the system is so poor. Technically, if you have to start over again, you have to take a new course. But so far, I haven't heard that they're pushing that. So we'll have to see how that pans out.
So if you already had a mass license and you already had like say you took the course 10 years ago, they might ask you to take another course.
If the license expired,
Which license expired? If
the non-resident,
So if you already had a non-resident
yeah,
and then it expires before
Yeah.
they get around to issuing, then you might have to take it again.
yeah. I have not seen them push that, but it's certainly within their purview to do that if they so, because the protections are not there for the non-residents that are there for the residents. So,
And one other quick question. I've
Yep.
been away for 3 years. I don't go back to Boston that often. I had been teaching NRA home firearm safety, which is not a live fire course, and people had been using that to get their Boston or their Mass LTCs.
Right.
Is that still a thing, or home firearm safety is no longer can be used, or because the law is not clear, we don't fucking know?
We have been told that everything is status quo for now
Okay.
until they come up with the new mandates.
Okay.
Now, one hiccup that I pointed out to the Firearm Control Advisory Board was obviously it's only good for FID, but you can have an FID at any age, is that hunter education is still going to be okay for an FID. And I pointed out that, wait a minute, folks, hunter ed doesn't have live fire. And they said, well, they can just add it. No, hunter ed is a national program. You don't just add things to a hunter education course. And they said, well, it'll be fine. So I can take a hunter ed course and not have to do live fire? Well, yeah. Ooh, this is going to be fun. All right, guys. Good luck to hunter ed for trying to keep up with the classes that they're going to have to do. This was the same thing that happened almost 20 years ago when FID cards, became renewable 25 years ago, that people were just rushing to get the hunter ed course so they could get their FID card so they could hunt. And we actually, at one point, they were so far behind. Goal rented an entire hotel, one of the big ballrooms, and Fish and Wildlife worked with us. We got all the instructors together. We put 120 students through in a weekend. So I think that's where they got to go back. Now, the real interesting thing is probably by the time they get up and running with the new standards, hunter ed may be completely online. So you're telling me people don't even have to go before an instructor, period, and just get a gun license. Kind of defeats their whole purpose, but I'm not going to complain about it, because if anybody wants it, if you just want an FID card to do whatever, you're a trap shooter, you're a hunter, you're whatever, have at it.
Hey, Jim, can I interrupt you a sec?
Yep.
Can everybody mute unless you're talking? Mute
Yeah,
is on
we
the
just-
bottom
Rich
left-hand
A.
side.
Rich A, dude, I think it's your background stuff that's picking in.
Rich,
Yeah, it's Rich A. That's his
on the bottom
microphone.
left-hand side of the application, there's a mute control. If you click on it, you'll mute. There
Thank
you
you.
go.
And Jim, can I just toss in my thoughts on the renewal since I've had a non-resident permit for like 7 years?
Rich A, I just muted it for you, so you're good. Sorry.
I
Yeah.
have done pretty well once after the initial one. If I'm running a little late, they've told me like figure 6 months. So you have to put in your renewal application 6 months ahead of time. But if it's in process and the one you have in your possession expires, but it's in process, that's been okay. That's happened to me twice. And I think I've had mine for 8 years.
Not as a non-resident.
Yeah.
Nope. It's illegal. It's illegal.
You didn't hear what I said, or I didn't say it right.
Yeah.
My permit has expired twice, which means I can't legally go into Mass.
Right.
But my application for renewal has been in progress. It's in the system. So I've not had to start from the beginning. That's what I'm trying to say.
I see what you're saying. I'm sorry.
Knock wood.
Yeah. Yeah. Because we had I'm sorry, Rick, because we had another gentleman that called me and he said, I just got my electronic receipt back and on the bottom it says I'm good until it's processed. And I'm like, yep, there's the state again. Once again, not knowing the law.
No.
So no.
I don't believe any of that stuff. All right. Thanks.
No. Yeah, Rick, thank you. Anthony.
Hi, Jim. Thanks for holding this. I appreciate it. I was a volunteer at the coalition, and I got the distinction of not only getting kicked out of the Big E, but Savage Arms. So that's my call to fame here. I'm going to go back to, I'm going to tie into what Mike was asking about, and I got a question that's kind of in the ethos, is understand we have about 600,000 LTC holders in Mass. And I just don't understand why the apathy. I don't know if you can talk to that. I understand that there's not even 600,000 of our LTC holders registered voters. So you're going to put together a program to educate people and get out in the public and such. But how can we reach these people that this is central core issue for? It boggles my mind, and that's my question here. What can we do to reach out to these?
It's twofold, and it's always been the case since I've done this, going on 30 years. But people, there's two issues there. People are apathetic. Oh, it doesn't matter what I do. It doesn't matter what I say. It doesn't matter if I vote. The other piece of that is that if things don't happen immediately, screw goal. I joined them 1 year and they couldn't get anything done. I was at a gun show with my wife once and she was helping out, and the guy's lucky I didn't come over the table at him. He threw the application back at my wife and said, I'm not joining your friggin' organization till you fix all these laws. Well, excuse me, that's like telling your platoon, hey, go take this hill. I'll be up there when you do the job, right? It's duplicated or exacerbated rather by the times we live in, because everybody wants immediate success. It's, hey, you filed a lawsuit, but you lost. Yeah. Okay. Or, hey, when is the lawsuit coming? Now, I warned, and I've said this many times, I warned everybody during the fight of this bill, which we were basically battling with one arm tied behind our back because so many people wouldn't come out and fight, that if all the people that said, stop that stupid nonsense at the State House and take this to court. Okay. And what I tell to those people is now get out your golf checks, because this is going to probably cost us $1 million or $2 million to even try. And I don't see them jumping up and down, trying to donate money to get it. But the other thing is they want everything to be done immediately. Like how many people that have bitched at me about, you should have taken this whole thing to the Supreme Court already and been done with. Well, that's not how the Supreme Court works. And you can't blame them, because we don't teach civics in high school. I mean, even Richard Dreyfuss wrote a whole book about why we don't teach civics. And they don't understand that you have to pick this thing apart to pieces, bring one piece at a time. You have to have standing, you have to have good plaintiffs, and you have to have the money to withstand the losses at the first district. The other thing, quite frankly, Anthony, and this is something, I'm no longer on the NRA board, but I'm on a couple of their committees. A friend of mine, Todd in Pennsylvania, has tried to start a new state or association from scratch. And Gold tried to help him out. We bought software for him and whatever. And they have spent 2 years and $30,000, and they have 300 members. So he and I really started to do some research nationwide. And the problem is the membership business model is crashing. And it doesn't matter what subject matter it is. It could be birds, for crying out loud. It could be a plumbers association. All membership business models are crashing. And it's because the under 45s, the millennials and the Gen Zs, could care less about being a member of anything. Now, one of the ironies in that research, and it's evident if you pay attention to it, they desperately want to feel like they belong, but they're not willing to invest any physical time to make that happen. So we had actually done some experiments. If you saw a few months ago, we were putting out a bunch of social media videos, different style, content, length, music, whatever. What we learned, which confirmed the national research, you have 1/6 of a second to get their attention, and you have 3 to keep it.
Wow.
Even 3 seconds, if you've got their attention, you will see those metrics just drop like a rock. And if you're lucky, if you have a really exciting video, you will get maybe 10% to go past 10 seconds. Now, keep in mind, that's somebody who spends an average of 7 hours a day on their phone. So the other thing is value. I sat, I couldn't believe this, in the membership committee meeting at the NRA at the last meeting. I wasn't on the committee, but I sat in on the meeting. And here's a guy in his 70s trying to tell us how to attract young members. We need to relook at our hotel discounts and our insurance programs. And even us guys 60 and under were like, can somebody just go find him a cocktail somewhere so we can have a serious conversation? So how do you, first of all, what is value to those people? And we're desperately trying to figure that out now. Matter of fact, we've actually hired a polling company for the very first time, and we're trying to drill down into that. So what is value to somebody that you have 1/6 of a second? But also, whether it's Gold, the NRA, I don't care if it's Mass Audubon, how do you portray value in 1/6 of a second? And that's what we're facing right now. Because my thing now, if you've all noticed, I've slowly started to step back a little bit and push Mike and Carrie Ann forward. And that's my job. Anybody in my position, when you start to see the end of the road coming, it's going to be years down the road, but I have to make sure there are people ready to help you when either I kick the bucket or just want to go away. So, but I want to leave them with a solid business model so they can continue to do their job to help everybody. The other thing we're seeing, interestingly enough, is last year, specifically, donations were good. We were getting in donations. So talking to my colleagues around the country, they're almost to the point now where their donations are more than their membership income. So that tells you what's coming. So there's a lot there that we have to try to figure out to get something going. But again, some of that has to be physical presence. You know, that's how the news is not going to be able to ignore us. But there's a lot to this, and we're doing our best to figure it out. This is all brand new for everybody in the 2A community nationwide. They've never had to figure this out, but that's a lot of my job right now, is to make sure that we're good for the future.
Okay. Appreciate your candor on that. And, you know, I did the math. I mean, if we had 600,000 LTC holders and they each gave $100, I mean, you know, there's $60 million. What could we do with $60 million, right?
If they all voted,
well,
you know,
exactly.
If they all made a phone call last year,
yeah,
you know,
true.
The sad thing is a good number.
I was at PD, and it was military and police, and I can't believe the number of people that said they wouldn't sign the petition, and they were law enforcement, and they were ex-military, and they were first responders. And it I don't know. I'm a newbie here, arguably, but it was mind blowing.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your answer.
Sure, Eric, you're up.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for hosting this. A lot of good conversation. Couple of thoughts. One, relative to what you just talked about in trying to attract members. I think the theme of safety and self-defense is a personal interest, might be a way to dangle a bit of a carrot in front of people. Regarding lack of involvement and activism, you know, not a lot of people are single issue voters. In Massachusetts, there have been a number of things going on, and all of the 2A stuff and the infringements on your Second Amendment rights is only one of them. However, for a lot of people, it's a straw that breaks the camel's back, but it's everything else that's been going on too that's inducing people to seek greener pastures or freer pastures or whatever you want to call it. Those are just observations. My question is on a different topic, and I'm not a lawyer, but I had an idea, and this just might be really stupid noobism or just food for thought. Is it possible that as a legal strategy, we could force Massachusetts through lawsuits to actually execute on the bill that they have passed? And this sounds like a kamikaze attack in a way, but make them eat the dog food that they've produced. You wanted to have a new website and a new database, give it to us. You wanted to have new training, force them to do it. Make them run the bureaucratic obstacle course that they've laid out. Has anyone considered this, or is this just completely idiotic on my part?
No. Well, let me say this. If it's idiotic, then I'm an idiot, because I've actually talked to a lot of attorneys about this. Here's the problem that I was given, that the Supreme Court has ruled on at least one, if not many occasions, that just because the systems are not in place is not an excuse for you not to comply.
But the state, right? But the state has its own obligations to discharge under this legislation that's been signed into law.
Right.
So failure to execute on an administrative front is not grounds for some sort of a suit?
Nope. Believe me, I've looked into it.
Okay. Where's that equity? Where's that equity when you really need it?
I know, right? Matter of fact, during one of Chairman Day's garbage listening tour stops, there was a gentleman from the Moms, nice guy actually, Patrick, older retired doctor who had been shot. And even he was up going, wait a minute, where's the data? It's in the law, which we actually put in the 2014 law, that they were supposed to come up with all this data. He goes, it's in the law. And they had to tell him doesn't exist. So I went up to him afterwards and introduced myself. And I said, Patrick, if you're going to lose sleep over things the state doesn't do that is required of them to do, you'll never sleep the rest of your life, because how many laws that Goal has passed that I've written personally that they just don't comply with. I mean, back in 2014, we actually got into a very basic that the state police was supposed to put out public service announcements on training and safe storage. It's been in law for 10 years. Ever seen it? Nope. That's just one little tiny example. That's the irony of the government system that we have, is they can require something, but not actually facilitate it.
Yeah. So, yeah. Okay. So I'll offer one observation on that. I appreciate your candor on that, and actually having thought through this before I came up with it. But one of the things that seems so you made the you were using the analogy of the metaphor earlier about fighting with one hand behind your back. You're actually fighting with one hand and one leg tied behind your back, because on the other side of things, when you do manage to get a challenge out in front of the court, like the First Circuit Court of Appeals is playing basically a denial of service game on you. So you can't proactively compel the state to execute on the administrative functions that they lay out in law, and on the other hand, you can't get a good timely hearing on anything because of the fact that everyone's playing defense. You know, the like-minded justices and such. You can't get in front of them and get them to have a timely ruling on anything either. And then SCOTUS doesn't seem to take up the issues that you're really salivating for them to take up sometimes. So anyway, all right, just a thought, but I appreciate your response on that. As disappointing as it was.
I'll give you another example, Eric. Being on the NRA board up till this year, the First Amendment case the NRA had against the New York Attorney General, the governor, the mayor, there's a host of people.
Sure.
That eventually we sort of won in Supreme Court. And it was the God, who the hell argued for it? Was the Civil Rights League actually argued it for the NRA, because they recognized if New York can do this to, say, a conservative group, what can they do
on
to
that
us?
front? Exactly.
So,
right.
But the New York judge in the case at the New York level actually, I don't know if sequester is the right word, but reams of documents that even he said would be damning to the plaintiffs that we were not entitled to until we won the case. Huh? So we can't have the evidence to win the case, but we need to win the case to get the evidence. So it's amazing.
Yeah,
But anyway.
It just seems like there's a stacked deck there on the judicial front. So I was looking for sort of a jujitsu move to sort of make these people abide by and wince under the pressure of performing under their own legislation.
Well, not far off from that too, Eric. The other thought process that I've had in dealing with others too is bring a case to court just to make them clarify something.
Sure. It's a tactic. It's a form of lawfare. It's a mild form of lawfare. It's not the same kind of lawfare that they perform. I get it. So I appreciate.
Yeah.
I appreciate all of this, and in the interest of time and other people's questions, I'll defer. But thank you. I appreciate this very much.
No, absolutely. Al, you're up. Al's the bomb.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So just a little thing I want to put out there, and I had messaged you before, but I don't know if I actually sent it. So I know you were friends on Facebook. I believe you know what I do for a living. For those that are here, I'm a court officer for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I've been doing it for 24 years. And I will say I'm ready to retire. I got 8 more to go. But so we have a wonderful thing in that law that says you cannot bring firearms onto court property. It's pretty clear. Now, we've had a long-standing policy where you can secure your firearm legally in the courthouse upon entry if you have a legal firearm. So I said to I brought it up the ladder up the chain of command, and it went all the way to Boston. That we're technically in violation if we allow someone to come into the courthouse with a firearm and secure it, based on the current writing of the law. It says you must secure it in your vehicle, correct?
As far as I know, yeah.
So
Yep.
the trial court essentially just said, well, we're going to maintain the status quo. And the problem is going to be when we have someone enter from the public who goes to secure their firearm at the front door. And, I don't know, state trooper has a hair across his ass that particular day, or environmental police officers standing there, or whoever, and decides they want to enforce that part of the law. And it sets up a very interesting scenario as to who is in the right and who is in the wrong. I kind of want to put that out there to you because it's a serious issue for somebody down the road.
Well, it's very common, unfortunately, in Massachusetts gun law for things like that. A number of years ago, we fought to. There's a law in the books that if you're on a recreational vehicle like ATV, snowmobile, even on your own property, you cannot carry a gun.
Right.
It has to be unloaded and closed in a case.
I've actually seen one of those cases.
Yeah. So when we went to the Executive Office of Public Safety, we went to the wardens, and all we were told is, well, we're not enforcing that the way it reads. Well, then change the law. Well, we don't need to because we're not. Listen, this is the problem I have being on the Firearm Control Advisory Board, is realizing the people on that board don't know how to read law. And here I am, a technical high school graduate that's probably written more law than they've ever read. But when you have to actually explain to people how law works and how to read it, and they just go, that's okay. And I'll never forget when I was on the Gun Control Advisory Board, and I had to tell them that gun buybacks were illegal. They were absolutely illegal.
Yep.
And the representative from the Boston police said, well, it's a public safety issue, so we're just going to keep doing it anyway. I said, so the laws are okay for you to break, but not us? But that's what we face throughout the entire system, is that nobody understands these laws. I mean, 25 years after 1998, we would still have debates. John Green and I would sit in the office and have debates over what a sentence meant. So one of the things with a non-resident, another example, is they keep pointing to this exemption in 129C that if you're under the supervision, of a license holder or a trainer or whatever. But the problem is it doesn't say non-residents. Now, if you go way down the bottom of 129C, there are two sections that deal specifically with non-residents. And because those two pieces are specific to non-residents, the other piece does not apply. And no one in the room, including a retired judge, understood that. So it's incredibly frustrating to try to talk to these people about it. So,
and one more thing I'd just like to add, going into what we were talking about with people not wanting to get involved. So I live here in Westfield, Mass. We have a pretty good gun club here. We've got a lot of Pro 2A people in this general area. And I worked my ass off out there trying to get people to sign the petitions. And it was amazing, as I said, it was amazing the number of people who I know are 2A, Pro 2A, law enforcement, fellow court officers, people across the Commonwealth that literally deal with it every day. And they go, I don't want to sign that. I don't want to put my name to it. And it's mind-numbing that we have that mental block here in the Commonwealth. And I don't know if Mass has just gone too far over the edge and people just don't want to touch it or what it is, but it's a serious problem for us going forward.
Well, some of that is the cancel culture that's still out there.
Yep,
that
definitely
they,
is.
They're scared to death of their jobs and their and whatever. My wife and I have a side business. We have a spice company, and frankly, I don't give a shit if people know what I do for a living. If they don't want to buy my spice, go screw. But we don't have to make a living on this stuff. It's just fun. But it's amazing the effect that the cancel culture really did have on society, especially through COVID. I mean, look what they did to to drown out any opposition to COVID, which has nothing to do with our issue. But you know what scares me now is that if the next pandemic is real, nobody's going to believe it. So, but it's kind of interesting that, you know, I mean, look what they tried to do to even like Joe Rogan, for crying out loud. You know, they tried to tear him down. So it is, the other thing too is it's funny because it's most of people my age and older. Well, I don't want to be on the list, and you know, I don't want them to know who I am. Trust me, you know, Market Basket knows who you are and what you do. So don't worry about being on a list anymore. But anyway,
Right.
anything else, Al?
No, that's all. Thank you.
Cool. Jim DeSessa.
Yes. Thank you, Jim. I'm gonna pile on the non-resident LTC issue, and then I got another question for you. I've had my LTC non-resident for 6 or 7 years. I put my renewal in on January 7th for my expiration on May 9th. Okay. Nothing in the mail on May 8th or 9th. Okay. I started phone calls, emails, nothing. It wasn't until I have a quote unquote contact in state police who finally pushed the FRB to do it. And so on June 9th, I got my renewal. So just more of that actual nonsense. So,
Yep.
but I did have a question or request for info. You know, as we work towards vote no on 135, I know you said, you know, you're going to basically be starting up in the fall with programs and what have you. I'm wondering how we can reach these people who don't know, don't care. Because even if we got every licensed LTC holder to vote no, that's still not going to be enough. And
Yeah.
my feeling is we have to get out there, and I know you're going to have protests and stuff like that. I think that's good. I think a lot of people view those negatively too. A bunch of wacko gun owners out there, but you know, my feeling, and I've spoken at a couple of groups like Drake at Republican Party, American Legion, stuff like that, and I feel we need to find ways to get people who aren't afraid to stand up the front of the room and do a presentation or present information, even to a hostile crowd, you know. But it's just, you know, how do we get that to happen?
That's what we're working on. And you know, the first thing is messaging. We've got to get the messaging down pat. And we're trying to work with Toby and the crew on that. So we already have a few things set up on our website just as a backup forum. I think it's, what is it, goal.org/no chapter 135. You know, there's a bunch of information up there. There's already some artwork you can use for posters and things like that. But the messaging is crucial. And it can't be save our guns or this is a bad law. You know, it has to be about civil rights or they won't care. They just won't care. You know, I constantly talk about bigotry and corruption because that's what it is. It's flat out bigotry against 10% of the state's population. This has nothing to do with safety. This is garbage. We're the safest community there is. You know, crime is only increasing. And I love how they say crime's decreasing, but then when you look into it, what they've done is they've carved out a specific sector of crime and say, well, see, look over here, this is decreasing. Yeah, well, tell that to the victims in the hospital. So, but anyway, yeah, it's something we are desperately trying to work on, Jim, and hopefully we'll be ready come fall. So,
Right. That'll be great.
Rich,
I'm ready to get out there.
mute. You're on
Rich
mute,
is
Rich.
on mute.
How's that?
There we go.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate it. Thanks, everybody. I
Nice
wanted to
beard, by
comment.
the way.
What's that?
Nice beard. You should have seen my COVID beard. It was a big thing, for crying out loud. Yeah.
Started it during COVID, actually. A friend of mine ended up in the hospital. He had this big beard and he was in the hospital. I never got to see him and he passed. and I never cut it off. So
Yeah,
I never used to have one my whole life. But nevertheless, it suits me.
sure.
But I wanted to say it may be popular, may not be, but I've been an independent my whole life, and I collected signatures for Toby Leary and the program in order to be able to. And I agreed that a lot of people didn't want to have their names associated with it because they were afraid somehow that list was going to get out to the state level, and at the state level there was going to be a retribution because of that. And that's what I heard a great deal. But there were a lot of people who did sign. Nevertheless, what I've been mulling over this the whole time, trying to understand how do you reach a state that is predominantly liberal, where there is a minority of Republicans, and the majority of the gun owners tend to be Republican, not all.
No.
I find that a lot of them are independents, like myself.
Yep.
And that independent mindset, we see both sides of the aisle or try to, and try to make really good decisions based on that. And most of the people that I know who are independents like myself are pretty quiet and don't get out very often. But the liberal crowd that I know, I think in order to get to them, because they're the votes you're going to have to get a hold of. And in order to get to them, you have to attach a message that incorporates both ideas, both what's happening to the two-way community in Massachusetts and what's happening in Washington. I think Toby Leary's starting to do that a little bit on his website, I saw. And I think that is the only way. I know we're all kind of attached to our political beliefs, and I embrace anyone's political beliefs to be their own. It's fine. But in order to get this over the hump, I think what we have to do is be able to create a message that talks about the civil rights loss, but associate it with other civil rights losses that they see. Not necessarily we see, but they see. And if you can put it in a way that they tend to attach those things, because they're very passionate about what's going on in Washington now. And they're less passionate about the two-way, Chapter 135. But if we attach 135 to what's going on in Washington, which goes against a lot of people's beliefs, but if we can find a way of doing that, you draw that other part, you get everybody's attention, you get a lot of people's attention. And I think that is the path moving forward, or one of the successful possibilities of the path moving forward. And that's a hard one, I know, because we're all attached to what we want.
I totally don't disagree with you, because if you've seen, I'm sure you have, since I took over for Goal way many more years than I want to remember, you've never heard me use the term gun rights. I hate that term with a passion. It's civil rights. And of course, I'll have some of our guys, it's inalienable rights. Well, first of all, in marketing, if you start off with a term that people don't even know what the hell is, you lose right away. Because if you have to explain to yourself, nobody knows what inalienable rights are anymore as far as the general public goes. So that's why, to me, it's always been civil rights. And that's why, even though we haven't decided on it, that's what I have been trying to focus on, is bigotry and corruption, because those are terms that ring with the majority of Massachusetts voters, because they see what happens if government gets out of control. And I mean, right now, just me personally, I see everything across the country. Government at every angle on every side is eating itself. Yeah. And we sit there. One of the things that, as an aside, that frustrates the crap out of me is government suing each other nonstop. Our courts are so bound up with politicians suing politicians because they don't like their opinions, and even lower court judges not respecting the Supreme Court. We had that here in Massachusetts, right? That's what we're facing now. Supreme Court said the Second Amendment's not a secondary right. It's a civil right. You will respect it. Massachusetts went. So absolutely. I think your idea on messaging is rock solid, and I'm right there with you. I have tried for 25, 30 years to not be partisan. The problem is it's almost impossible not to be now. And I still don't really go crazy on it, because I understand the implications, but it's what did a radio host say? It was not relative to our issue, but not all Democrats are anti-gun, but so far all the anti-gun legislators are Democrats. So, and we've lost A+ rated Democrats for years and years and years until this bill came through. And it's because they realized they didn't need us. They didn't need anybody, not just Gold. They didn't need anybody. So I think you're right on the money, Rich. I think you're right on.
It's been something that's been eating me right along, because as I have liberal friends, I have conservative friends, and I listen to these arguments on both sides. And what the common denominator tends to be is if it's a civil liberty that's being taken away and you group it, my arguments with them is if I group it, it's a large number of civil liberties. Well, it's, gun rights is the easiest one to pick away, but then you have loss of, freedom of speech and freedom of liberty and freedom of assembly and all these things. When you start talking to them about all those things together and remove the Republican Democrat monikers to them, all of a sudden people start listening.
Yep.
And and the thing that I find, the battle that I always fight with my liberal friends, is they think that anybody who owns a firearm in Massachusetts is a Republican. That's not true.
No.
It's just not true. But somehow the 2A community has gotten labeled as a conservative group, and because I think guns and all the other things that are going on in the world, and somehow if we have to be able to remove ourselves from that moniker so we can stand out on our own as a civil liberties group. And
many years ago, politically, I can't stand the guy, but this is going back decades. Barney Frank actually told the Democratic Party, if we controlled the unions in the 2A vote, we would never lose an election ever again. But for some reason, somebody decided at the higher ups that 2A is bad. The other thing, I used to beg Wayne LaPierre not to go to CPAC anymore. Why are you going to CPAC? You're just entrenching the idea that 2A is a Republican issue. It used to drive me nuts. But, of course, we found out later that there were bigger problems with Wayne, but that's for a whole nother show. But yeah, Rich, I'm with you, and we'll continue to work on that. So, Eric, you're up.
Thanks. To piggyback on what Rich is saying, excellent points. A thought to tie in with that. You've got the 250th anniversary of the U.S. coming up. Now, I know that we had observances here for Lexington and Concord. And to piggyback on what Rich was saying, the Second Amendment's important, and I don't want to seem like I'm preaching to the choir here, just to make the quick observation, because it's the backstop for all the other civil rights. Why did the British want to grab the shot and powder at Lexington and Concord? Right?
Yeah.
And the theme of the last 10 years or so on either side of the aisle has been a modified freakout about what the other side was going to do when they got into power. So the whole maintenance of civil rights is germane and should be center of thought to, frankly, every American that can read and understand the Constitution. And why we have these things, and unfortunately, Jim, this sounds like it mounts up to, the remedial civics instruction that's been abandoned over the course of the last however many decades in this country. Because this used to be just in the air and everybody understood it, and no one had to talk about it because that's the way everyone had been brought up. And so there is some backfilling here, but there's also it seems like there's some happenstance and some coincidence here that could be powerful timing issues relative to, the 250th anniversary of America and a number of other issues. And so I don't know the conversations that you're having, but I think that theme plays well, and it plays well regardless of what political party or non-party. And in Massachusetts, independents are the largest voting bloc.
Yep.
I'm unaffiliated.
Yeah, I am too. I've never been registered.
I mean, I don't really, whatever. It's like, I'm kind of like the opposite of Bernie Sanders. I caucus with the Republicans because,
Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't give any money because I can't support them. They're tactically, they often don't do what I want them to do. Anyway, and in the meantime, I work at Brown University, so I'm in the belly of the beast a lot of the time. So, I can understand where the other side is coming from in large measure. But I think Rich makes a good point. In as much as these issues should be of interest to everyone, for whatever reason.
It's one of those things we have to be a little cautious on not getting too deep into the weeds, but still attracting, the whole liberty for all. When I speak at universities, matter of fact, the last time I spoke at UMass, I think I had 80 students in the room, and I was talking about advocacy and this and that. And I asked the class, I said, can you name me the top 2 most powerful corporations in the country? And of course, you got Blackwater and all this kind of stuff. And nope. And they're like, all right, well, tell us. 2 most powerful corporations in the country are the RNC and the DNC. And they look at you and go, what do you mean? I said, they're corporations. They don't represent you. They are private corporations who seek power.
Yep.
What other 2 corporations could write a check for $35 trillion with no hope of paying it back? But the problem is, once you get into those high-level discussions, you start to carve off 75% of your audience. So the trick is, right back to Rich, is, make sure that it's about liberty and civil rights.
Absolutely. And everybody's rights. I'm not looking at posing this as a conservative issue or anything. And I think your observation about Wayne LaPierre's attendance at CPAC is a misstep.
Used to drive me crazy.
For the reasons that you could go on about, but that's a good observation. I had never thought of that, but that's an excellent perception on your part. Again, thank you for this.
Yep. Cool.
Appreciate it.
I think Ken dropped off. I was going to ask him if he had anything, but so guys, it's been about an hour and a half already. If there's anything short that I can answer, otherwise, my email is jim@gold.org. So pretty easy to remember. It's so funny because years ago it used to be Jim Wallace at gold.org, and I would tell people Jim Wallace, all one word, at gold.org, and then people would call and complain. So, well, what'd you type in? What you told me, Jim Wallace, all one word. Okay, never mind. That's not going to work. Hey, my sister used to work for AT&T when the computer towers first came out, and the call she would get about there's no place to put the CD in with all the data. Okay, start at the top of your computer and go down and tell me what's there. And they would get to the CD tray. They go, and there's a pop-out cup holder. And the other thing, they had to change all of their manuals because they would say press any key. People couldn't find the any key. So they had to change all their manuals to spacebar. So, but anyway. All right, crew. Well, thanks a lot. Hopefully this was a little helpful to you. And we're going to do more of these as we move along. And
I think
certainly,
Al might have a question, not to delay your departure.
Nope. Al?
Real quick, did I win the raffle?
Unfortunately, we don't know right now because Angie takes care of all that.
Yeah, no. I'm just joking around.
Yeah,
just joking around.
Angie was rushed to the hospital with a medical emergency, so we're all
kind
of keeping track of what's going on there. But
well, pass along my well wishes to her.
Yep, will do. I think she probably got in one of those mosh pits at the concerts she goes to. So that woman has been to more concerts. It's incredible. But hey, whatever. Good for her. She's single. All right, crew. Well, thanks a lot. Thanks for all your support. Good questions. Good discussion. And if you need anything else, just let us know. Okay.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks,
Good night,
Jim.
guys.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you,
Talk to
Jim.
you.
Thank
Thanks,
you
Jim.
for everything you do.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. Thank you.
And give it.